director, Liesl Finner, and our esteemed panelists who will be speaking today. So if you're new to the Maryland State Arts Council's webinars, I do want to just refresh your memory. Google Meets may not be familiar to you. I want to point out here the raised hand feature. When we get to the question and answer component of the panel at the end, you can use that to get in queue and to unmute and answer your questions. In the meantime, please keep your mics on mute until you are called on. There is a chat feature. We will be using the chat throughout, so it is on the far right of your screen. All right, so for all of our Maryland State Arts Council's meetings, we start with a series of grounding slides. And our first component of that is a land acknowledgement statement. This was made in collaboration with tribes of Maryland in consultation, and this is part of a larger project that the Maryland Arts Council initiates, and you can learn more about it on our website, and it's some really incredible maps in history and how to do your own land statement for your organization. So land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Akanaw Indian tribe, the Assateague Peoples tribe, the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, the Chapatico Band of Indians, Lenape tribe, the Natatope tribe, the Nassauwabe Band of Indians, the Piscataway Conowe tribe, the Piscataway Indian Nation, the Pocomoke Indian Nation, and the Susquehannock Indians, the river band of the Shawnee, and the tribes of the Chesapeake watershed, who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and the waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that comes to be wrought on the lands and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and the waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and the waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. I'm now going to share our equity and justice statement of the Maryland State Arts Council. The arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organization and cross communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religion, creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. This is the Maryland State Arts Council vision and mission. The Maryland State Arts Council plays an essential role in ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And our mission is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all people of Maryland. This is our strategic plan. I will just read the parts in bold. You can learn more about our strategic plan also on our website. Our goal 1, to increase in participation. Goal 2, provide intentional support. 3, build capacity. 4, leverage connections. And 5, bolster Maryland arts. We gather, these are sort of our guiding principles in meetings, and I again will just share the parts in bold. Our creative meeting actions are to celebrate, engage, acknowledge, enter the conversation with curiosity, share your ideas, and trust you will be heard. I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, apply yes and balance speaking and listening. Friendly reminder that we have a plethora of professional development opportunities like the one you're joining here. So please check out learn more about those. And we have several open calls right now for grants, for editors, for panelists. As a panelist, you get a really great opportunity to learn about arts in Maryland and also learn about the grants process. So if that's something you're interested in, please join us. We have several opportunities open right now. And with that, we get to the agenda of why we are here today. So thank you for joining us again. For those who just joined us, my name is Nora Howell. I'm the Public Art Project Manager, and today we are going to be talking about community engagement as a foundation for public art. So we're going to start with a few I will be introducing us, and then we have invited Jasper A Sanchez, the Assistant Curator of Boston Public Art Triennial, to share from their work. And then we will hear from Laschelle from Leonardtown, and Jamie, an artist who works on some incredible projects in Leonardtown, Maryland. And then we will close with a question and answer following that. So please let us know in the chat who you are, what you want to be called, where you're located, and do you consider yourself a beginner to public engagement, community engagement in public art, intermediate, maybe you have some experience, and then advanced, you have lots of experience. It's something that you are here to share and also learn. So let us know in the chat so we can welcome you and also know how to best answer questions as we go through our presentation. So I want to hand it over to Jasper A. Sanchez, Assistant Curator from the Boston Public Art Triennial, to share about their experience. All right, Jasper.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Next slide, please. My name is Jasper Sanchez. This is great to start. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm joining you from the city of Boston on the territory of the Massachusetts and the Pawtucket people and their neighbors, the Wampanoag and the Nipmuc. I'm really delighted to be able to share with you today a little bit more about our organization and an initiative of ours that we started last year. We're going into our second year and opening up in June 10th of 2024. But for now, I'm sharing what we're working on and what we worked on last year. So next slide, please. For those who aren't familiar with us, Boston Public Art Triennial was formerly known as Now and There, and we're a public art curator with the mission to foster artists and the public to create bold public art experiences, all towards the goal of making public space and communal space in Boston more open, equitable, and vibrant for all. What you're seeing on the screen is a really big picture of Lot Lab 2023. And for our organization, Lot Lab is an outdoor 24/7 laboratory and exploration zone for site-specific contemporary art. It's open, free, and for all, and it's based right now in the Charlestown Navy Yard in Boston. And really what we use it for is an opportunity to provide local and visiting artists a space to present work. I think it's critical to share a little bit about why Lot Lab exists and bring it back to the topic at hand of community engagement. Typically, our organization curated what we called 5 or 6 signature projects all over the city of Boston. We've done projects at Faneuil Hall, on the Boston Common, in Back Bay, if you're familiar with any of those neighborhoods and areas. And we realized over time that we've been around since 2014, that making impactful community-informed art takes time. And showing up at different locations and popping down an artwork for 5 or 6 months and then leaving by the winter wasn't allowing us to have the impact and to really build the relationships that we wanted to in order to produce art in concert with community as our mission was. So Lot Lab was actually a pivot for us. And instead of curating multiple projects all over the city, we're really focusing on one area, one neighborhood. And our mission is to come back to that neighborhood 3 consecutive years. So as I mentioned earlier, we're coming into our second year, but last year was our inaugural year at Lot Lab. And so ultimately, this was a response to the challenge of creating impactful community-informed art. And it allows us to build upon the relationships and networks we find in the neighborhood where we produce art and come back to it year after year. And really, I called it once, dig into the archaeology of a site and a space and all the various histories that make it up. Next slide, please. So to start us off, what we came to at Lot Lab was this. Before we produced art there, it was this abandoned warehouse building that had been empty since the 70s, and it was a vacant parking lot. And part of our process is really delving deep and diving into a site's history, and really trying to understand that before we even begin our community engagement. And we're looking at communities that live and work directly in and around the site, but we're also a citywide organization and trying to learn about how this neighborhood exists in relationship to the rest of the city. So the Husak Stores building and this abandoned parking lot had been empty for decades, and the folks who lived around it quite literally called it an eyesore to us. Right, the need that we understood was that they wanted this place to really be beautified, and so we started understanding why here, why now. And the now is informed out of a partnership with the National Park Service, who invited us to feature this. This building is slated for demolition, and it's been interesting to have that behind us as we do this, because some neighbors hate the building and they want it to go, and some of the community is attached to it. They're like, oh no, why is this building coming down? So we find ourselves in this middle ground of wanting to change the space, but also acknowledge that different community members have different needs and wants for it. And in our research, we also started thinking about not just what people think of this site, but what does the rest of Boston think of Charlestown, and particularly of the Navy Yard. This site is informed by generations of intertwining narratives, from the colonial dispossession of this land from Native Indigenous populations to the establishment of a naval yard in 1798 as an effort toward building a united nationhood. To the labor naval service of formerly enslaved African Americans, the establishment of Irish, Italian, and Latin American immigrant communities, and an entire generation of women laborers during World War II, up until the Navy Yard was decommissioned in 1974 and became part of the National Park Service. So, like most places in the United States, the Charlestown Navy Yard is a really complex site of multiple intersecting and often conflicting histories. Like all American land, its history is fraught with compromises, accommodations, aspirations, and violence. Next slide, please. So we came to this site with the mission of transforming this space with all of these various complex histories with art and community. And what you're seeing all the way on the left is where Lot Lab was in 2023. That's the building facade that the sculpture was on. And this is the rest of the Navy Yard. It's a fascinating site. It was a Navy Yard where they repaired vessels. Those big U shapes are called dry docks. They would dam them out and bring in the boats and repair them there. And when we were setting a theme for Lot Lab in 2023, we were thinking about a lot of our research and conversations with artists, neighbors, residents, and we learned about some of these fragmented histories that I had just mentioned. In particular, we thought about, I've heard anecdotes from Black Bostonians who shared that they avoided Charlestown because of its history of segregation and racism. It was the epicenter of the busing crisis. Many Bostonians simply don't come out to Charlestown or the Navy Yard. It's widely understood as touristy or inaccessible. In the slide before, you can't see it too well, but it's not directly connected to mainland Boston. You have to get there through some bridges or through ferries and boats. And the area is also a victim of gentrification. The wealthier communities develop towards the waterfront because it's quite literally divided by this bridge. You can see it on the screen. It's called the Tobin Bridge. It leads into Chelsea, Massachusetts. And so what this bridge has done, it's divided in East and West Charlestown, and it's created this affluent community by the waterfront. And it's on the other side of the Bunker Hill Monument, we have the Bunker Hill Development Projects, which is recognized by the Boston Housing Authority as the largest public housing development in the city of Boston. So all of this was boiling in our heads as we were thinking of setting a theme and setting artists for this. And we realized that we wanted to first approach this exhibition, our first year at Lot Lab, through this theme of mending. We started exploring the idea of suturing, repair, healing, and coming together. And we imagined a space in which suturing is a frame for commissioning projects that encourage connectivity and mending and attenuate social or cultural divisions. This rationale was also, in a punny way, just inspired by the Navy Yard's literal history as a site for repair. So we started asking ourselves, how can art be used to mend our relationship to Charlestown's legacy, to mend these social, geographic, historical, and cultural divides, or even in the simplest of terms, mend the relationship neighbors have to this once abandoned, overlooked lot? And so all of the projects that I'll be sharing with you. Oh, last slide, please. Apologies. All of the projects that I'll be sharing with you are particularly inspired by the Harbor Waters, feminist histories of women's labor, and this richness of the maritime lifestyle towards mending our relationship to this site. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is an early draft layout, just to give you a glance of our process that starts to suggest new circulation patterns, art, and amenities. We wanted to make this site welcoming, give folks a place to rest, to sit, and also to give it more color and make it vibrant, and also respond to how the neighborhood and community was already using it. Next slide, please. The first project I'll be talking about is Women's Qualities by Gara Amir. I wanted to start here because the other two projects were brand new site-specific commissions that I'll really dig into, but this was a borrowed work. And I wanted to share this to talk about it, but also share a bit about how we recontextualize the borrowed work and still think of community while we do that. This is a piece by Gara Amir. Gara Amir is an Egyptian-born New York-based artist whose practice spans painting, embroidery, sculpture, and works on paper, ceramics, and more. And her work contends with the ambiguities that emerge from attempts to define or contain binaries, such as femininity or masculinity, East and West, or art and craft. This work was part of a series that Amir began in 2000 that interrogates our society's notions of womanhood. And she created these pieces by gathering words from polls to passersby of the artwork's location. So in 2000 South Korea, she polled people, and the most common words she got were virtuous, chaste, submissive, fair-skinned, sensual. In New York in the 2020s, she discovered the words she received from the public were hardworking, good, cook, strong, resilient, beautiful, sexy. And while this iteration is actually borrowed from a 2021 series that she presented at the Desert X Biennial, and the words are beautiful, loving, nurturing, resilient, strong, caring, and determined. And so we selected this work to highlight the significant contributions of women in shipbuilding, including their efforts as critical laborers during World War II. And we chose to present it in this circular format to use it as an armature provocation for activation. We love that this circular form really sets a stage almost. And what we did was we partnered with local garden clubs and horticultural groups, particularly a group called Navy Yard Garden and Art, to help assist us in the horticultural care of this series, of this artwork. And we also invited local wellness and performance groups to program in and around the work. So on the bottom left, you see there's a yoga group that met every week and would organize inside of the artwork. A final note is that we recontextualized this piece by selecting native New England plant species for it. In older iterations, it always has plant species unique to where it's located. So when it was in the Coachella Valley, it had like cacti and more arid area plants. And here in New England, we had things like lowbush blueberry, coneflower, sumac, fern, and yarrow. Next slide, please. The other work we had is a ground mural created by Maciel Grullon. Mas is a Boston-born and raised Dominican painter, muralist, and educator with over a decade of experience as a mentor for a nonprofit that teaches youth art called Artists for Humanity here in Boston. Grullon's signature style is inspired by these abstract, super graphic styles from the 60s and 70s, and it shows a really nuanced understanding of color theory and creating these really harmonious compositions. And this work, we conceptualized it as a passive invitation for play and engagement. And we wanted to respond to existing features of the site, but also invite folks who use the space to slow down, maybe spend time with the artworks and look at the lots overlooked features. Next slide, please. And when I say that we responded to how the neighborhood uses it, I mean that very literally in that we responded to desire paths of the site. Part of our research process is going to the place where we have the artwork and just observing, sitting down for an hour or two, seeing how people come through and use the space and taking notes, doing that independently, but also with the artist if we have a site visit. And if you look on the satellite image on the top left, you can see that there's a bit of a dirt path that's been cut into the corner of this parking lot. And it happens again at the bottom left of the lot. And we noticed in our observations that, so this is right next to the Boston Harbor Walk, and the community and neighbors of this area jog and bike and come through with strollers. It's a very, very active space, but this lot was dividing that. So there's this desire path of people cutting through the grass, walking across the lot, and they would quite literally jump over a bollard. There was a chain bollard fence there before continuing down the sidewalk on their path. So we asked the artists to engage that. If people are already doing this, how can we make that a more vibrant and fun experience? So what Maciel did was respond to, but also disrupt that desire path. So folks who come in, you can see how the mural was designed to sort of pull them in. And it also sort of bleeds onto this little concrete plinth that was just begging to be turned into a stage. And it even goes up from the ground onto the wall of this unused guard shack that's at the parking lot. And on the right, I can't spend too much on this for time's sake, but I can always go down a wormhole talking about the details of the art. This mural in particular was inspired by the undulating lines used to represent water in historic maps of this dock in the Hoosac Tunnel docks. And the break on the top of here is also inspired by the nearby Zakim Bridge in Charlestown, and it's called nautical waves because of the knots that make up some of the naval rope. Next slide, please.
Oh, you got 5 minutes.
Perfect. I will also be talking a bit about our largest piece, Stay by Sam Fields. This work was made by the artist's own tight-knit community of makers. And it showcased again this exhibition of women's labor while bridging to communities outside of Charlestown. We share this as an example to sort of share that sometimes the communities we engage aren't always the ones directly living or working around. And it's because our mission is also to connect neighborhoods to one another. And so Sam Fields is a textile artist from Brockton who's drawn to these materials and processes that have typically lived outside of an art context. Sam leads this incredible space in Boston called the Cloth Collaborative, where she hosts fiber-based workshops at a sliding scale. And to Fields, craft is a philosophy which acts as both resistance and a model for change. They see slowness, process, and communal labor as a lesson and a tool to push against inequitable power structures. And so this project is called Stay, and next slide, please. It's inspired by traditional rope making techniques and the meaning of the word stay, as well as its function as rigging to support a sailing vessel's mast. I can go down another wormhole here talking about, maritime history, but just know that it's inspired by these forms, bulbous forms called mice, which are used to hold stays, the ropes that hold up a mast on a sailing vessel. And I'm going to read to you a quote from Fields really quickly about the process she used to make this. She decided to individually splice over 360 ropes around these 7 individually crafted or woven buoys. And it was a months-long process. And she could have just knotted them, but it was very intentional that she chose to take apart the threads of the naval rope and tie them back together. Sam wrote that a knot is a singular form and actually lessens the strength of the rope, degrading its integrity over time. It is a quick fix. While a splice takes longer to make, it is a connection that retains the strength of the rope. Splicing requires many strands within the rope to reconfigure, working together to make a connection. This is a beautiful illustration of the work of community building and connecting both backward and forward in time. Next slide, please. So Sam went back to the Cloth Collaborative, where they work with folks of all ages in textile, and they hired a team of 10 laborers to help them individually splice and create this massive sculpture out of nautical rope. What you're seeing on the left is images of the laborers in their studio. Another layer of this, adding to this conversation of women's labor, is that everyone in Sam's team was femme identifying. And that was an intentional choice of the artists and the work they do at the Craft Collaborative. A final note on this project before I wrap up on the last one is that just to share a little more about the process, the project was so large and it took so much work that it wasn't ready in time for our initial opening reception. And while that was a challenge, we still found a way to bring Sam and her team into the opening reception to have a really engaging presence with us. What you're seeing in the middle is just a small mock-up that we were able to have in time for the opening reception. And we invited Sam and her team to set up a table at our opening celebration and actually teach community members how to splice. So that's what you're seeing on the right, is folks using some of that naval rope, taking it apart and splicing it back together, really enacting the work that Sam and her crew did to create this sculpture. Next slide, please. I now have to wrap up in like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm keeping track, Nora. This is the final work I wanted to share. It was made directly with the Charlestown community. We paired an artist, Kyle Brown, with a local neighborhood youth organizations and invited them to create their own messages on signaling flags. Kyle is a Chelsea-based multidisciplinary artist and educator who has a background in maritime stuff. Like her family were sailors. A lot of her work and paintings are like oysters and stuff. And she also is an experienced workshop facilitator. And we wanted Charlestown residents to have a more direct and participatory voice in the exhibition, and also give them a sense of agency and presence on the site. So we partnered with the Charlestown Boys and Girls Club and the Charlestown Coalition's Turn It Around Youth Teen Group. And Kyle helped us conceptualize a series of workshops around signaling flags. Signaling flags are used internationally on sailing vessels to communicate regardless of language barriers. And next slide, please. Kyle had workshops with over 4 workshops throughout the summer, and invited youth to create designs inspired by signal flags and responding to prompts such as, what do you want to say to your community? Or imagine you are signaling to another city, or what would Charlestown say? And what you end up with is this really wonderful, diverse array of flags that represent heritage and pride, and also the diversity of the neighborhood. Charlestown is associated with whiteness and with being a mostly Irish Italian community. And what we start to showcase here is that while yes, there are lots of Irish flags, you can see one of my favorite ones with the sheep on the bottom left, we also learned that there were Cape Verdean and Puerto Rican communities, and we were able to really showcase this. And we also were able to share these really beautiful messages of peace and community, and see what matters to this next generation of Charlestown. I love the flag on the bottom left that has the Mokeho Monument. It says Townies on it. There's a painting of the USS Constitution vessel. And what we did throughout the summer was, we had so many flags we couldn't show them all at once, was that we cycled them. So I think every month and a half, 5 or 6 weeks, we would take down the flags on the flagpole and put up new ones. That was a practical thing as well. The flags really wore and tore in the weather, so we wanted to keep them looking nice and fresh every couple months. And what we did was, we digitally scanned every single one of the flags that we received, and we added them to our website to create a digital gallery, so that if folks came by to the site and didn't see their flags on the flagpole, they could still go on our website and see themselves there. Last slide, please. And all of that is just how we sort of really built community engagement in various ways into the projects. I am the curator who worked closely on all of these. And that's not even speaking for some of the programs that my wonderful programs team helped bring to the space throughout Lot Lab's duration. We had an open mic. We always had chalk on site so people could add color to this asphalt lot. We had an all-female breakdancing crew come out to the space. We had a local artist from SM Art Studio, Sophia Moon, come do small workshops. And we even had the Boston Music Project come out with a musical instrument petting zoo. So there was a lot going on that summer beyond what I showed you. But thank you very much for listening, and I can't wait to do Q&A after this.
Thank you, Jasper, so much. I hope you get a chance to read the compliments and response in the chat. We are going to hold questions until after the next presentation, and then we'll open it up for everyone. I'm so thrilled that we have a team from Maryland joining us today. Laschelle McKay, the town administrator from Leonardtown, and Jamie Naluai. I know I should do this better. Nalu is here. Thank you so much. They're going to share about some recent works that they did in Southern Maryland. All right, I'll turn it over to.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Great presentation, Jasper. So today I want to introduce you to Leonardtown Public Art. We have a number of public art projects that we have installed in the last 7 years, and we're very proud of all of them. I'm going to just really focus on one specific project, but this is a sample of many of our projects that we have done in the last 7 years. The one in the center is at our winery, and that's 12-foot tall wine glasses that rotate in the wind. It's called Wind Cheer. And then we have our waterfront wharf Then and Now, that is by Jamie Naluai, who's joining me today. And she did that mural in, I think, 2018. And our most recent is at the top, the waterfront archway. We have 2 of these that were just installed. They're really beautiful. And then the naturalist bench is in front of Town Hall, which is by Perrin Collery. Next slide, please. When I started thinking about this presentation, I felt that our public art community engagement really began more as a bigger picture. And I think it's important for you to look at as an all-encompassing, not just the art, but how it blends in with your community. So in 2018, we engaged consultants, Mayhan Reichel and Arnett Muldrow, to do a downtown strategic plan for us. And it really opened our eyes to what we weren't really seeing the details, because we're there every day. So it was like a fresh set of eyes. And we have a town square. We're very fortunate that has stayed intact, where we had large events, but we really didn't utilize it on a day-to-day basis. So they helped us to transform it so that people would have community gathering places every day. And they had us do a rebranding campaign. We put in some new landscaping, took out some overgrown landscaping, and some seating areas we added, shade trees, because we didn't really think about it. People were walking around and there wasn't a lot of shade trees. Next slide, please. One of the larger projects that came out of this was called L-Town Alley, and this was a vision of the consultants that we engaged. And what we had was a situation where we had rows of our retail and our restaurant buildings, the core of our downtown, and behind it was most of our public parking. But the alleyways leading to the main streets, they were just really in private ownership, a lot of them. They were really in bad condition, and you didn't want to be back there. So it was kind of separating our businesses from the parking that we had. So we transformed this alley network into using beautiful artwork into a vibrant place for people we can have events there. People can just hang out there, but it's also a safe place to get from parking to all of our retail and our shopping areas. Next slide, please. We embarked on what turned out to be about a $500,000 to $600,000 project. We thought it was really important to make it a really viable place for people to want to be. And we put together a committee of about 10 people who are business owners, building owners, artists, and developers. And they all had a common some type of creative, whether they were artists per se or businesses that had some type of art creativity. And we came up with 14 or 15, I think it is, different types of art that we would like to see in this alley. So we have art that we can continue installing for the next several years. We decided to start with 3 murals. Next slide, please. So we selected, we received a $4,000 planning grant from Southern Maryland Heritage Areas, and we put together the committee that I was talking about, and we put out an RFQ for 3 mural projects, and we chose some general themes that we wanted to see each of the murals follow. And then we also chose an object that we wanted to use as kind of our mascot for ongoing initiatives, and we chose the butterfly for that. And it ended up transforming into, during COVID, we did a butterfly trail. We had an artist that did beautiful batik banners that we put throughout the town. We had a brochure that kind of took people on a trail to all the different sites that we had and places of interest and different businesses. And we had a scavenger hunt during the trail, for the trail. But we tried to incorporate the butterfly and caterpillar theme, and it really caught on, especially during COVID. Following choosing those, we had the, please, thank you. We had presentations from all the respondents from our RFQ, and we had them do presentations, and we ended up choosing the 3 finalists for the 3 different murals. And we gave them a stipend from the original planning grant to finish finalize their design. And then they worked with us to come up with the final plans that everyone was happy with. And then we also at that time received a $20,000 grant from the Maryland State Arts Council for our public art, one of the installations. And we secured 2 other grants from town funding, and we got enough money together to do the entire project, including the murals. Next slide. And so the first one that was chosen was our artist that's joining us today, Jamie Naluai. It was called Where Art and Agriculture Meet. And I think Jamie is on, and let her jump on and kind of give her perspective on the process.
Thanks for having me today. My name is Jamie Naluai. I go by she, her, and I have been doing murals for the last 15 years. And so I was really excited that when the RFQ came out, this was basically in my own backyard. And I was able to meet with the committee and get their ideas on what they wanted. And actually the process took 2 designs, and I was thankful for that, because the first design that I came up with just didn't feel right. And so they came back and they said, nobody quite got what we were looking for. So more discussion. And then this is what I came up with. My mom's a quilter, and there are a lot of beautiful stores downtown area that deal with the fiber works. And in fact, the side of this building is a fiber works building where they use a lot of fibers to create just beautiful works of art. And so I took that theme and ran with it. And you can see there's butterflies in there, and the sunflower. And yes, we're part of Maryland, but we're in Southern Maryland, and Southern Maryland is very agricultural land, and the rolling hills and the beautiful water and beautiful skies. And so I was able to incorporate that. One of the fun things about this project is that it was right next to a little parklet where mothers and families.
Slide, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Where mothers and fathers and families would come around, and as I was painting, I would get several people that wanted to just stop and watch, and I love that. And then if they ever said anything, there was one little girl that said, "Oh, I just absolutely love ladybugs." And so I stuck a ladybug up in the tree. And so I said, when you come back, I want you to find it. Also, you will find, so I have hidden pictures in the mural so that people can come back and kind of do an I Spy based on some of just when I was talking to the children that came by as I painted. And you can't really see it, but if you blow this up later, there's a cute little bunny rabbit in the corner of the little barn stall. And that little bunny rabbit is from a little girl named Joy. Her mother was kind enough to send me a text picture of her rabbit hop, and I was able to put that right into the mural. Also, we have Lily, the alpaca, and she was sitting right there and said, "My name is Lily." And I said, "Well, what if I named this alpaca Lily?" And she said, "Well, you have to spell it right, Lilly." And I did. And so that was a lot of fun to not just work with the community at large and this committee, but it was also wonderful to just work with the passerbys and make it there so that as they walked by, those children that I've put in little I Spies and how many sheep are there will always remember that, oh yeah, that's my sheep, that's my lady. So
thank you, Jamie. Next slide, please. Our second project was called, ended up being Alice in Leonardtown. Our theme for this, and it started as recycled art, And we just love that it was flexible enough, the committee was, as well as the artist, to, this is where we landed with Alice in Leonardtown. And we also had said that we wanted a movie screen in the center of it so that we can show outdoor movies on it. So that's the white space that's in the middle there. And their take on the recycled part was there's a boat that's upside down being used as a table, and just a number of items like that they consider that recycled. And people fell in love with this. The butterfly theme stayed in there, and we had just a lot of things spun off of this. We had a large art auction that was themed Alice in Leonardtown with the characters, and we had the movie, of course. Alice in Wonderland was the first movie that we showed there. And as it turned out, the two artists were actually Navy pilots that worked on Pax River here in our community, and they were artists on the side, and they did this beautiful piece for us. So we really just love the diversity in our artists as well. Next slide, please. And our third was the one that we used the Maryland State Arts Council grant on. And this actually turned into two murals. The topic that we wanted was history or local, whether it's Leonardtown or just local community history. And so it ended up being 6 artists that worked together. They are all part of a artist gallery that's been in town for about 30 years. So very experienced artist. And they came up with this one is called Bay Life. And it's just beautiful. People love to stand by the butterfly and take photos. Lisa was actually here for our ribbon cutting on that one. It just was turned just out beautifully, and it's very vibrant. You can see it from a long distance. Next slide, please. And in the same part of the alley on the opposite wall, this is called Legends and Lore, where they had some fun with some of the local things that people know from history around this area. Next slide, please. And this had a huge amount of community involvement. The 6 artists worked with over 1,000 hours in the project, but they also had 54 volunteers that came and helped paint the project over several months, investing 1,500 hours. They were all ages. You could see the little girl there, older people. People just loved it. They really took pride in being part of it. And then there was ceramic work that also is part of it. We had over 177 hours on the people that helped with the ceramic work. So just really engaged the audience, and everyone loved it. And we had a huge turnout on the day that we had the ribbon cutting for that. Next slide, please. So what's next for Leonardtown as far as their public art? So this year in our budget, we have funded to do a public art plan. And our goal with this is we're getting, everyone wants a mural on their business wall, and a lot of ideas on our waterfront for different sculptures. So we'd really like to put together a plan and have a priority and kind of pull together like we did with the downtown plan, and have roundtables and different people from the community coming out to see what they like. And we've worked really hard to have a lot of different types of public art. We did 2 different locations. We did musical instruments for kids to play, but we want to just keep expanding that. And so we'd really like to make sure that it's done so it's not just hodgepodge, and we kind of have themes and things that people want to see. So we will be starting that in July, and we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie, because she's going to give a little bit more of her perspective.
All right, we got one minute, y'all.
Okay.
Well, just quickly then, I love that art is having a moment, and I love that art is having a moment where I live. And it's not just happening where I live, but it's happening where a lot of you live. And so I was able to be a part of a workshop recently in which you can do next slide, please. But I was able to sit with 20 other people that wanted to do what I do, and I was able to talk with them and work with them. I also can get inside the schools, and I've done projects where they're learning how to do mural art. Next slide, please. And then this mural workshop that I was recently doing last August, we took those 20 people and with working with the Parks and Rec, we took 3 bathrooms that were in our regional parks, and we each did a mural there, and the community got involved, and they got involved, and they are now learning the process of how to create art so that they can be a part of this really amazing program too. And I think that that's what I have loved about it, is that I get to share what I love with others so that they can enjoy it as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie and Laschelle. Such a rich examples. So we now have time for question and answers. So if you would like to ask a question, you can put it in the chat or click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen and we'll queue up the questions from there. I will call on folks' names. You can unmute and ask your question. Liesl is monitoring the chat. So if you don't want to unmute, we will still capture your questions. All right, so let's get started. Karen, you're first.
I'm curious as to whether other people who are participating have run into the problem, or it's not a problem, it's a challenge. In our city, most public art is funded through the city government. 1/10 of 1% of the budget is allocated for art, and I'm curious as to whether people have hints for how to manage political interference.
Jasper or Laschelle, do you want to speak to that?
We haven't really run into to that. We seem to have a pretty good buy-in. We are working with other areas in the county. I'm actually on the Arts Council and have been for the last 10 years. So we do a lot of joint projects. There's another area of the county that we're doing a whole arts park, and it's an underserved area. And it seems that most of the political people have gotten on board with it and really are appreciative of it. And we try to source a lot of different funding avenues and grants so that we're not always going with our hand out, but they have been supportive as well. So I haven't really run into an issue with that.
Well, I should clarify, there's great support and buy-in for the arts. I'm actually like at a micro level, when you have politicians who want to come in some instances very late in a process in terms of design, and I was curious whether anybody else runs into that.
I haven't really.
Yeah, Jasper, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, I haven't really as well. I've been sitting with your question. This may or may not be helpful, but in instances where I've seen public art get contested by politicians or governing officials, something that has supported in the past, at least in Boston, it's also a different environment, I think, from one city to the next, and the bureaucracies that you engage with. But at least in Boston, what I have seen is having letters of support and buy-in from community members and organizations is really helpful in leveraging and swaying when you're dealing with some sort of unexpected interference. I've definitely presented to neighborhood arts councils and counselors and gotten their support. So there's so many folks involved when it comes to bureaucracy and government, and it's not just city governments, it's local governments and even neighborhood councils. And the more people you can talk to and get buy-in for your project, I think the more you can leverage that against any sort of interference at that scale.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you. And if folks have experience they want to share for Karen, please dump that in the chat or connect afterwards. Laschelle, Trisha asks, Can you give a little more information about the plan? I'd like to know if it's being done internally or if you hired a consultant, and cost and scope for your public art plan.
We budgeted $20,000, I believe. We are applying for a grant to help supplement that. We had seen a couple of one local plan, and then reached out to a couple other towns that have done them, and it seems the $20,000 to $25,000 range is what it would take. And so we haven't enlisted a consultant at this point. It's in our starting July 1st in our budget.
Thank you. And I will say that public art plan is an eligible expense for our public art across Maryland planning grants that will open at the end of summer 2024. Christy Little asks, does anyone know if all the projects shown are permanent murals artworks? So can you speak to that? Both of our presenters, of the things you've shown, are those permanent or temporary?
Ours are all permanent. We have easements on any of the buildings. We have had one that was had to be relocated because they changed the building and it wasn't able to be on the same building it was on. But ours are all removable and can be moved to a different location, but they are meant to be permanent.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking for clarification. Our organization only curates temporary and site-specific projects. So nothing we do is permanent, and that's very intentional. It takes much more time to create permanent public art, especially in the city of Boston. So it's much easier and much more feasible to create temporary projects. But also, not just because it's easy, we also like it because it allows us to be very experimental. Permanence comes with it, thinking, what will this be in 10, 15, 20, 100 years? And a lot of the times, some of our projects are prototype monuments. We want to talk about certain stories and experiment with ways that we can address them without having to be weighed down by permanence.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read a question in the chat. Sometimes there are public art opportunities, there are requirements of you need certain experience that's hard to obtain. This artist received advice to work with other artists to gain experience, and that can be hard to find as well. So do you have any advice for a beginning or emerging public artists, how to get started and how to connect with artists with good potential?
Mm-hmm. I'd love to start with a response to this one.
Yeah.
So at my organization, I also facilitate a yearly program called the Public Art Accelerator. And it's exactly for what you mentioned. It's because there's a limited pool of resources to learn about making and producing public art. And we wanted to teach local artists how to do that, especially in the city of Boston. And it's tricky, right? Wanting to sell yourself as someone who's intrigued in public art and wanting to and feeling that potential. And so what I've pulled up on my screen, and I won't share, but I'll read them, is some of the questions that we ask in our accelerator application, because I think these may be helpful as you, and this is public, you can go to it on our website later and see it for yourself. But to give you an idea of what we look for when we're looking for artists who haven't made public art but are interested in, we ultimately ask, to describe a significant project and think about how additional funding would have expanded its scale and impact. We ask folks applying to this opportunity to also, I think public art is very different from non-public art because it's directly involved with community. It's why we're here today on this webinar. So in our application, we ask folks to describe a situation in which they've incorporated audience feedback, participation, or engagement in their work. And if you haven't done that, how would you imagine doing so? And I think thinking about questions like this can help you sort of craft your answers to whatever opportunity you're looking at. But what I look for, at least, is folks who don't just want to make work that's bigger, right? But also want to make work for more people and with more people as well. And that's something that helps when sort of selling yourself as someone interested in the field.
I think Jamie could speak to that really well. She does a very good job with this.
So I started out small, and I came, and what I found is I just gave my art for free, but I would give it to public spaces. So when I first moved to the area, I went to the local library and I said, I would love to paint in here. What can I paint with you or for you and with the children? And just I find when you open your arms out, then they are free to be full of things. And so just from that experience and putting that experience out there, I was able to get more stuff and be involved, and then we just did this community workshop where we said, hey, who else is interested? And so maybe it's something that you as an artist can go to your arts council and say, can we do a workshop? I'd sure like to be involved in some projects. And then as part of that project, we hired a special photographer so that we build up their portfolios. And then we taught them how to answer an RFQ. We went to the Maryland site, which is amazing. They have an amazing program on there to show you how to fill out the forms. And I have to say that I have just appreciated my local arts council and Laschelle, but also Liesl. She is always there to answer a question when I have it. And I can email her, how do I fill this out? And she responds. And it really is, if you're interested, you can make it work.
Great, thank you. We're gonna go to the next hand raise. Kirsty Little.
Hi, thank you very much for correcting my name. For some reason, I think in England we say it Kirsty and you say it differently over there. I just wanted to follow up and ask Jasper whether they only use local artists or do they use artists from all over America for their program? And I wanted to flag up Tammy's question, which I don't know if that came up or not, so I've been dipping in and out a little bit here, that if you haven't had much experience, how do you get to apply and get noticed if you have a good idea, but you haven't actually done a huge public installation before, which I have, but I've only done temporary ones so far, so I'm kind of interested in that area as well.
Thank you for your question. We did just answer the Tammy's question.
Oh, you did, yeah.
But no worries. And some what I had suggested was sort of thinking about how you want to increase the impact and the communities that you reach and work with, and show that as a point of potential. As to whether our organization uses artists from outside Boston, absolutely, we do. Gadamir, who I just spoke about, is an Egyptian-born New York-based artist. This upcoming year, we have a work by Hugh Hayden, an artist who's also based in New York. And in the past, we've had works from artists from the West Coast. We've had works from international artists. It's our mission to curate local artists with non-local artists. And often those non-local artists, we sort of leverage their platform to give our local artists a little more attention. So it's a very intentional thing. The Accelerator program, however, is not for non-local artists. You must live in the greater Boston area to be part of that.
Thank you.
And I will also, I failed to include a slide. I will drop my email in the chat. So if anyone wants to follow up with me or share their information, I'm always on the lookout for artists. I welcome inquiries.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you. All right, Jillian, you'll be our last question of the day.
Hi, yeah, my name is Jillian McMaster. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at the Delaplane Arts Center in downtown Frederick. And a lot of what I do is working with groups providing, we provide free art workshops, art experiences to a variety of groups and nonprofit organizations in need in Frederick County. But sort of like an area where I have been, I guess, lacking in bringing people in is like public schools. And so I was just wondering, in what capacity have you collaborated or worked with educators, public schools in like when executing these public art projects?
Jamie has to hop off because she's going to teach some children public art. Do you have a second to say something?
I do have a second. So I love that our Arts Council has an education grant, and so that any school can apply. And I'm an artist in residence, and I will go to a school and teach them these projects. But I'm also, as an artist, whenever I do anything in my community, I always try to figure out how can I get the children involved. And I think that's because I teach children. So I'm teaching today in just 2 minutes at a Bay Montessori. So I always make that a priority. So, and I think if you ask your artists and your arts council to make those fundings available, or just ask them how they can get the schools involved, the teachers and the administrators really appreciate that, because these children love the arts. They really do. And thank you so much for having me today. And I gotta go. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. And we
Thank
have-
you, Jamie, for squeezing us in today.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm sorry.
No, that-
So that concludes our webinar. I know there's a few questions in the chat we didn't get to. I will try to answer them before closing it down, but we were officially complete. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have you. We will be adding this webinar to our YouTube channel on the Maryland State Arts Council's YouTube channel. So it'll be available in a few days if you want to share it to anyone. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. And as a friendly reminder for my Maryland residents, the Public Art Across Maryland grant will open at the end of the summer. And for all of these ideas that you have now, or if you've recently been awarded one of our public art grants and you have questions about community engagement, please reach out to Liesl or myself, and take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nora and Liesl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liesl, if you can turn off the recording.
Oh, thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you all so much.